Okay. Hopefully people can hear me before we can start. Um, we just need to get the technical aspects ready and to see whether everyone can hear me. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Can someone please indicate if you can hear me? Just to get everything out of the way before we get actually started with the meeting. If someone can just indicate on the chat that they can hear me, I will appreciate that. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Anonymous. I can see that you can hear me and all is well. Let me go to my screen and hopefully you will be able to see my presentation slides here. Okay. I just give a few seconds for everyone to join. It is now exactly almost 10 o'clock, and we will start with financial accounting for companies, the second online class for you on this lovely Wednesday morning at 10. Hopefully, this will be a beneficial event for you. And what we are trying to do is just to get all the house rules in order before we get actually started on the meeting. Now, colleagues, it is now exactly 10 o'clock, and I'm going to not waste your time anymore. And we will continue with the administrative details. Just first and foremost, our module leader, Alfred Baloy, he takes charge of the module. And please, if you have any queries concerning the module, technical issues, please send your queries to the fact2601@unisa.ac.za email address, where we've got someone constantly looking after that email address to address your queries, rightfully so. Okay. Um, you can contact us via email as indicated, and the house rules for this live event, we've got questions and answers section for you that you can raise your questions. What I will be doing is I will quickly look at the first 4 lesson tools and specifically draw your attention to what is required for your assessment 1. Okay, so we need to quickly look at the first 4 lesson tools and highlight some issues that you can concentrate on for your assessment, and also just give you an overview of what these lessons tools are all about. All right, so the first of all, the study material, lesson tools 1 to 4. I just want to get my laser point here. And that is what your assessment 1 will consist of. It's an MCQ assessment and it will last for 2 hours. Please remember that the assessment will open at 1 and will close at 8. But there will be a timer running indicating to you how much time you have got left, and therefore you will only have 2 hours. Once you start with your assessment at 1, you have 2 hours and then you need to submit. If you, for example, only start at 18:30, then you will only be able to complete the assessment within an hour and a half, because the closing time is at 8 o'clock. Excuse me. You need to take cognizance of the fact that the closing time is at 8, but we allow you to start with your assessment on the 28th of March at 1. But definitely will close at 8. You've only got 1 attempt, so once you've started, you cannot restart it again. You need to complete it within that allowed 2 hours. Please, colleagues, assessment 1 is a theoretical and a calculation multiple choice questionnaire. So really, you need to look at your theory, considering the first 4 lesson tools, and which will consist of theoretical questions and then a little bit more of calculation questions, which I will show you which some of these questions will look like. Okay, so it's a good indication as to to show you exactly what the theory compiles of and how you will need to assess yourself with inside this assessment. All right, I'm not going to spend time on the introduction to company annual financial statements on your lesson tool 1, neither on conceptual framework lesson tool 2, and I will be concentrating on IFRS 18, the new developments there, which are basically only for your interest sake currently now is for your theoretical type of questions. Okay, so this is where you need to go through lesson tool 3. I know it's a huge statement, IFRS 18, but I will show you the which are really of most important for you, and then we will look at some examples and questions. Okay, without further ado, let's continue to what you need to know for your theoretical applications for your first lessons tools 1. As indicated, the introduction to company financial statements, we've got your Companies Act number 71 of 2008, categories of companies and directors, remuneration, shares, rights issue, underwriting of shares, theoretical type of questions, and then you can go onto the module site for video presentations on the Moodle platform, which gives you conceptual framework, Moodle video presentation, and so forth. The study material for your MCQs, as I've highlighted already, is your lessons tool 1 to 4. Now, colleagues, I cannot go through all of these items again, but I will show you now how a typical question and what you can expect of before we really get to the purpose of today's session. I just want to show you exactly what you can expect for the upcoming assessment, which deals with your rights issues, underwriting of shares, and typical calculation questions, but you need to know the theory to be able to apply it to the different questions. Just one thing before I continue, I just quickly want to show you on your My Module site, when you want to access your assessment 1 in the CAS My Exam site, you will see on the left-hand side there is a link, and then on the CAS My Exam site, that assessment 1, it's now closed now due to the fact that it's not yet open for you. All right, so there will be a link for you, and if you click on that link, it will take you to the page where you can then access the CAS My Exam site. Please, colleagues, remember that it would not be available until the 28th of March at 1. So you can browse normally to your My Module site. Okay, and then you come to the left here under welcome message, you will find the assessment 1 CAS My Exam site, and that link will take you to your CAS My Exam site. Okay, so colleagues, that is how you will access your My Module site and the assessment 1 CAS My Exam site. But again, I need to stress that that will only be available for you on the 28th of March at 1, exactly at 1. All right, so don't send us access the site. It will be available for you on the left hand side. You need to click on the link. It will take you to the CAS My Exam site, and then you need to indicate and accept the webcam capabilities. UNISA's policies is that you need to, all students must have laptops with webcam capabilities. So you need to accept that you can use the webcam to curb plagiarism. All right, colleagues, let me go back to my slides where we can quickly go through the scenario. Like I've indicated to you, I cannot spend time on lessons tools 1 to 3 on the parts of shares, rights issues, underwriting of shares, but I want to show you now a typical question that you can expect on the upcoming assessment. All right, colleagues, now this is already known knowledge to you, and I just want to highlight to you how you need to ensure that you know your theory. Okay, so this is a typical question that you can expect in your assessment 1. For example, capital contributed by shareholders of a company is known as share capital. When companies require additional funds from the public, the company would normally use the services of a financial institution to handle the additional share issue on their behalf. This financial institution we call an underwriter. All right, so Kraft Limited underwrites an issue of 250,000 ordinary shares at R3 each in Sontec. excuse me, Kraft Limited charges commission of 8% for their services. The public took up 235,000 of the shares that were on offer. So Kraft, which is the underwriter, he says that he will underwrite, he will make sure that 250,000 shares are taken up. If no one takes up 250,000 shares, not even anyone in the public, then Kraft is responsible for taking up that 250,000 shares. But now, since we know that the public took up 235,000 shares, we know that Kraft will be liable for the rest, which is 15,000. All right. So that we know from theory that when Kraft underwrites an issue of shares of 250,000, he is responsible for the full issue. But the public took up 235,000 shares, therefore Kraft will be liable for the rest that wasn't taken up. So what is the required? Okay, please explain and discuss whether Kraft Limited has any liability towards Sontec, and if so, what will this amount be? Now, colleagues, this is exactly what I'm talking about, to know that you need to know the theory with regards to practical application on the given question. All right. And then they ask in B, calculate the commission payable. Now, there's another catch there on commission payable. And after this session, you will know exactly what you need to do. All right, colleagues, again, it depends on how do you know your theory. Now, colleagues, first question. Kraft Limited is a financial institution that underwrite the share issue. Kraft is therefore responsible and provide a guarantee to Sontec that if the whole share issue of shares is not taken up by the public, Kraft will issue itself taken up the remainder. We've seen that 250,000 was an issue, okay? The public took up 235,000. Excuse me. And only 235,000 shares were taken up by the public, and Kraft is thus liable to take up the remainder of the shares, which is 15,000 shares. So what is therefore the liability? Well, it's 15,000 times shares or times 3 Rand, which is an issue, and therefore Kraft is liable for 45,000 Rand. And B, colleagues, because they indicated that Sontec Kraft charges commission of 8% for their services. This is another catch. It's not on what Kraft takes up. It's always on the full issue. That is what their services are for. So if Kraft is the underwriter and 250,000 was an issue, they are liable, calculate the commission payable to Kraft Limited, the capital of Sontec. Sontec is responsible to pay them 8% on always on the full issue, not on what was taken up. And therefore, colleagues, the commission payable is 250,000 times 3 times 8%, which is 60,000 Rand. That is the commission payable. All right, colleagues, that's one of the questions that you can almost expect in the assessment one. Here's another scenario which will close off the very first two and part of lesson unit 3 with regards to your assessment 1 calculations. And then we will start quickly looking at IFRS 18, which is the replacement for IAS 1, the presentation of annual financial statements. Okay, colleagues, this is another example. Very technical, and if you pay attention and base the theory, know the theory, you will be able to calculate these type of questions on given scenarios. Now, let's look at this question. The following balances were taken from the books of Armani on 28th of February 2025, the financial year end of the company. There are issue ordinary share capital of 250,000 Rand. So how many shares are in issue? Okay, it's 250,000 shares because you've got 1 Rand per share. Okay, there's 15,000, 10% non-cumulative preference shares of 100,000. Then it's 25,000, 15% cumulative preference shares for 80,000. That cumulative preference shares, you will see, means something. Okay, and 450,000 in retained earnings. But colleagues, we need to know, what do we need to calculate? Let's look at what it's indicated here. Included in the capital structure above are the following transactions that took place during the current financial year that ended on the 28th of February. So they tell us included in the capital structure. So included in this there are some things that are already done. Let's go and look at it. A capitalization issue that the directors made on 1st of February. Can you see that this is before the year-end date? But the balances include already the capitalization issue. Okay, so this becomes very technical, but I will show you exactly how to approach this. A capitalization issue that the directors made on 1st of February of 1 ordinary share for every 3 shares held at R1 per share. Okay, the directors of the company also approved the following transactions during the year. The issue of 2,010% cumulative preference shares at R8 per share on 1st of January 2025. So there was another issue made, okay, of preference share on 1st of January 2025. Our year end is 28th of February 2025. So what do you know from theory is that for the issue of cumulative preference shares or preference shares, they are always pro rata. Okay, that is what the theory tells you. The theory explains to you that when you issue preference shares, you can't take the full issue, but you need to pro rata the shares. And then, colleagues, that tells us that dividends and ordinary shares was declared at 20 cents per share on 28th of February, but no dividends were declared or paid during the previous financial year. So that means in the prior year, no dividends were declared, but in this year, we have got a dividend and ordinary share declaration of 20 cents. Now, whenever they tell you about dividend declaration, it would also mean that you're declaring preference share dividends. Okay, we don't need to tell you that. You need to know that. So the theory states that when we declare dividends, always preference share dividends are also declared. But hang on, when we talk about dividends that were not declared during the previous financial year, and we have got cumulative preference shares remains and keep their retention rate. That means that once they have not been declared in the prior year, you can declare them now. Excuse me. So that means that they keep their retention rate. It basically means that because you could not declare them last year, you need to include them for last year and then pay them out together with this year. Okay, that is what the theory talks about. Now let's go and see what they are required. What will the rand value be of the capitalization share issue issued to shareholders at 1st of February? So they want to know what is the capitalization of the rand value. Now, colleagues, because this 250,000 already include the capitalization share issue, we need to work backwards to determine what the value was before before this balance of 250,000 rand. So when we always work with capitalization issue, we need to determine the share value, the amount of shares, not the value of shares, but the amount of shares in issue. Therefore, colleagues, we know that when we work back to the shares, we divide 250,000 rand by R1 per share. So we know that there are 250,000 shares. So we divide to the ordinary shares in issue, including capitalization issue, is 250,000. Okay, but now there was a capitalization issue of one ordinary share for every 3 shares held. Okay, so that means inside that capital balance of 250,000, we have already included the capitalization shares. So now all we need to do is take 1 plus 3 to be able to work backwards. Okay, and we say that's 4. So 250,000 divided by 4 gives you 110,000 shares. Okay, so 110,000 shares were in issue for that period. And then, colleagues, so that is the value of the 110,000 shares. Excuse me, just 1 second. So now we know that the capitalization issue that the directors made on 1st of February 2025 of 1 ordinary shares for every 3 shares here. So let's just take a step back here. If for example, we know that the okay, if, for example, we know that the capitalization issue was not included in the capital structure, okay, then we would have had, then we would have said that one ordinary share for every 3 shares held at R1 per share is you divide the capitalization, the capital structure between 3 and not 4. If, for example, let's just take a step back here, okay? So if, for example, we set 250,000, okay, but we need, during the year, there was a capitalization issue, but it was not included. It wasn't included in the final balances. Here we indicate that the included in the capital structure on the date, it means it already takes into account the capitalization share. But if, for example, we said no, there it wasn't included, we just say the capital structure is this, and there was a capitalization issue during the year for one ordinary share for every 3 shares, you would only have divided that 250,000, okay, that 250,000 you would have divided by 3 and not 4. Okay, so 250,000 divided by 4 is 62,500. That is the value, the amount and value of shares, okay, of the capitalization issue. Why is it 62,500? That 110,000 is not correct. That's 62,500, okay? Because if you take 250,000 divided by 4, you will get 62,500. All right. So 62,500 times R1. Why do we multiply by R1? Because it was issued, it was held at R1 per share. Okay. Let's just go one step back again. Okay. If, for example, we said the capital structure above are the following transactions that took place during the current financial year, okay, and that 250,000 did not include the capitalization issue. You did not have to divide by 4, but because a capitalization issue was already included on the year-end date, which took place on 1st of February, we divide one ordinary share for 3 shares, we divide by 4 to work backwards. So we need to determine what the balances was before the capitalization took place. And that is why we would divide by 4, okay? And we divide 250,000 divided by 4 times R1 will give you your, excuse me, will give you your 62,500 Rand, okay? So therefore, the cap issue is 62.5 times 1 is 62,500. That was included within 250,000. Okay, so before that, before we had the capitalization issue, your balances was only 250,000 minus the 62,500, and that would have given you a 187,500. And colleagues, excuse me, that is the very first step. So what do we see here? Your theoretical knowledge will explain to you that when it's already included, okay, we need to work backwards by taking 1 plus 3, okay, gives you 4. If it were not included in the structure, you would have only divided by 3, okay, and therefore the cumulative, the capitalization issue is 62,500 Rand. All right, that would be the capitalization issue for the amount of shares on that value. Now, because I said here, the capitalization share issue is already included in the capital structure of the company. We need to obtain the balances just before the capitalization issue took place. Therefore, we are dividing the ordinary shares issued with 4 and not 3 to include the capitalization issue. The bonus issue in shares were therefore 62,500 shares, and the Rand value is 62,500 times 1, and that gives you 62,500 Rand. All right, colleagues, let's look at the amount of dividends. Now we know that dividends are declared on 20 cents on the amount of shares in issue for ordinary dividends, and then you simply multiply 250,000 times 20 cents and gives you 50,000. Non-cumulative preference shares, okay, is 15,000. So we know that non-cumulative preference shares, they were 15,000 times 10%, okay, and that will give you your non-cumulative preference shares times 10%, that will give you 1,500. Okay, and now the cumulative preference shares, remember that there we had more shares in issue. Okay, so cumulative preference shares is 64,000 times 15%, but we had 64,000 for 2 years. Okay, remember they were, let's go back to your 80,000. Let's just go back to show you there quickly. Okay, we had 25,000, 15% cumulative preference shares, which gives you 80,000 Rand. Okay, but on 1st of January, 2000, 10% cumulative preference shares at 8 Rand per share on 1st of January. We remember that I told you that these balances already included included in the capital structure. So that means that 2,000 times 8 is 16,000. Okay, so we know that, let's just go one step back there, just to show you. So that 80,000 Rand, okay, we only had 64,000 for the full 2 years, and then only for the last 2 months, we had 16,000 Rand. How do we determine that? Okay, because 80,000 includes the additional preference shares, cumulative preference shares. But remember, the additional 2,000 was only issued on 1st of January. How many months do your year end? It's only 2. It's January to February. Okay, therefore, 2,000 times 8 gives you 16,000, and 16,000 times 2 over 12. That will be the percentage of dividends. So it's 15% of cumulative preference shares. I'm sorry that you see that 10% should be 15% and not 10%. I see that there's a mistake there, a typo error there. So that should be 15%. Okay, and let's look at the dividend calculation here. For your so there it's 15%. Can you see we had 64,000 for the full 2 years? Okay, because why for the full 2 years? Because cumulative preference shares retains their dividend preferential right. That means that if you don't declare dividends, it will retain that dividend rights until you have enough funds to be able to issue dividends, okay, to pay dividends. Therefore, we had 2 years, we had 64,000 Rand times 15% times 2, and then we only had 16,000 that has been issued for the last 2 months. And that is plus 16,000 times 15% times 2 over 12. And colleagues, that is your total dividend for the year. What is the total dividend amount payable for the year ended? It's 28 February 2025 is 71,100, of which consists of 50,000. It's only application of the number of shares times 20 cents per share gives you 50,000. 15,000 non-cumulative preference shares, okay, it's 15,000 times 10%, okay, which is 1,500 Rand. Okay, if you look at your value of your preference shares here, okay, so it's 10% of 100,000, which is your 1,500, and sorry, that is it must be 100,000 times 10%. Okay, and times your 10%, which gives you 10,000 Rand. And then your cumulative preference shares, it's 80,000 on the amount of your cumulative preference shares. All right. And that is your value for your dividends. So colleagues, these are the type of questions that you can expect. Okay, remember that 1,500 is 10% of 100,000. I see there's a typo error here. It's not on the amount of shares, but on the value of the shares. Okay, it's 10% on the 100,000, which is 10,000, and then 64,000 and 16,000 is 19,600. Okay, so that correct figure there would be plus 50,000. Okay, plus 19,600. Okay, is 79,600. Now, colleagues, that is your what you can expect for assessment 1. I will rectify the slides here and I will put that on the My Module site as well. I see that there's a typo error here on the 15,000. That should be 100,000 times 10%. And that 15%, I realize now that there is another typo error here because it's at 15% and that issue was done for 15%. Okay, that is why we get that. Now, colleagues, for these are the type of questions concerning your dividends, underwriting of shares, the issue of shares, the capitalization of shares. This is how technical it can get. And I basically wants to get to your IFRS 18 requirements. Okay, let's just quickly go there. And then after we have looked at your IFRS 18, we will take a short break, 5-minute break, and then we can quickly look at IAS 2 concerning inventory. Colleagues, let me quickly look if you have got any questions. And for concerning wise, I will answer those questions and answers just after the session. Okay, of your IFRS 18. I quickly, because our time is limited, and I will address any questions and answers after the very first session. Now, as indicated, we are working towards your assessment 1, and that is the type of assessment, that is the type of questions you can expect, very theoretical and based, and we theoretical type of questions and calculations. Now, colleagues, IFRS 18 replaces IAS 1. Okay, IFRS 18 is to replace IAS 1 in response to the investors' demand for better information about companies' financial performance. The new requirements include new categories and subtotals in the statement of profit or loss, disclosure of management performance measurements, and enhanced requirements for grouping information. That is why IAS 1 was replaced by IFRS 18 to give a better presentation and disclosure of companies' financial statements. All right. The key features of IFRS 18 is to require companies to classify all items of income and expenses into one of the 5 new categories. All right. And these categories we will be looking at. You will notice that in your lesson tool 3, we have drafted and I've given an overview of the new requirements for IFRS 18. IFRS 18 is a really long standard, and we will try to squeeze in and show you where the differences lie, and you need to evaluate yourself according to the theoretical requirements of what is required for the upcoming assessment. I will show you more or less what the differences are, or basically just show you the new standard, how it looks like, because you have not been confronted with IAS 1 and you will be dealing with IFRS 18. Everything has been updated on your My Module site. I have also provided a video, an extensive long video for IFRS 18, and there are a lot of YouTube videos as well where you can look at the differences of IFRS 18 and IAS 1. But our session today is to concentrate and to show you exactly how the IFRS 18 is presented for financial companies of annual financial statements. Now, colleagues, the statement of profit and loss and other comprehensive income can be presented in 2 ways and or mixed. Okay, fact 2601 prefer the function method, and I will show you exactly how that look. By classifying income and expenditure in terms of their nature or function, but we prefer the function method, and I will show you how. This module preference is the classification of income and expenses according to function, which is on page 30 of your lesson tool 3, where we've highlighted how the statement looks like. Now, operating expenses, there is actually no more choice, but really depends on the main business activity, or investing in assets or providing finance to customers. So basically, IFRS 18, which replaces IAS 1 in 2027, means that you will need to give retrospective comparatives since 2026. So if you introduce IFRS 18, you will also need to restate your IFRS, your 2026 figures. It was introduced in 2024, and companies will be required to provide company annual financial statements according to IFRS 18 from 1st of January 2027, of which means that they will need to restate their comparatives for 2026. Now, colleagues, this is a typical example of what you can expect. For FACT 2601 purposes, we will deal with general entities which consist of retail entities and manufacturing entities. And this is the statement of profit or loss, general corporate requirements for operating expenses by function. Okay, they've introduced now 5 new categories which consist of your operating category, your investing category, and your financing category. All right. There are 2 other categories, income tax and discontinued operations, which is not normally relevant to us. But when you need to present your annual financial statements, this is the format that you will need to concentrate on. Okay. So what does it allow you to do? When we are dealing with companies in our module for FACT 2601, we will only deal with companies that consist of a retail entity or a manufacturing entity. And then your statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income will look like this. You have to include your operating category. You don't need to show category operating, investing, or financing, but you know that this section here consists of your operating category. That basically means that when you don't have a main business activity, for example, like banks, okay, where you provide financing to customers and you need to charge interest expenses and you will receive interest income, your main business activity is general of a retail entity and manufacturing entity, then your income statement will look like this. The 5 categories are just shown you here for disclosure purposes, for presentations purposes, but you will not need to write it down. Category, this is the operating section, and this is the investing category, that is the financing category. It's just a matter now where you will present your interest on finances and where you will disclose your interest income from cash and cash equivalents, or share profit from share associates, which is not really relevant to you. And this is just an indication of how you will present your financial statements according to the new IFRS 18. Now, colleagues, you will see that this does look almost similar as the IAS 1 if you were introduced with IAS 1, but you also need to have the subtotals which are required and is prescribed by IFRS 18, which indicate that after you've indicated all the operating activity sections, you must indicate the operating profit. This is a new subtotal that was introduced. Then, colleagues, you will bring in your investing activities, okay? Interest income from cash and cash equivalents. That is where you will introduce your interest income. Then you will show profit before financing income and tax. This is a new required subtotal. And then you will indicate your financing activities. So if, for example, you've got a long-term loan on liabilities or mortgage or whatever the case might be, you need to bring in the interest expense here. If your main business activities like banks or financial houses, this interest expense will always go up to the operating category. Why do I say this? Because this is important in the theoretical discussion type questions for assessment 1, where you need to know exactly that when we deal with entities that main business activities are financial houses or banks, they will introduce their interest expense or interest income on their operating section and not in the financing section. So this is basically the way that we can go into the theoretical aspects for your assessment 1. Okay, so this is the statement for your income statement for FACT 2601 purposes. And I will show you again one question that will highlight how you can address these sections. But really what is important that IFRS 18 provides, especially in the statement of profit and loss and other comprehensive income, the operating section, the investing section, the financing section, the income tax section, and the discontinued operation category. And then the specific subtotals that were introduced is operating profit, which take into consideration all the operating category sections, the profit before financing and income tax, and then your profit before income tax, which was always there, profit from continued operations, and then profit for the year. This is exactly how it used to look like, or will look like now. Now, colleagues, this is just an indication for you to see that if entities were to have a main business activity, what their statement of profit or loss would look like. Okay, so with entities specified main business activity providing finance to customers, they will have a completely different presentation of their statement of profit and loss. But this is not relevant for you to be able to provide or draft financial statements. We will never ask of you to draft financial statements for entities with specified main business activity providing finance to customers. Okay, our purposes is entities without specified main business activity. For example, your retail entity or your manufacturing entity. But you need to know on a theoretical basis, okay, where it would belong to. Okay, so all I'm saying is, yes, we will not ask of you the statement to prepare or draft a statement for entities with specified main business activity, but you need to know that, yes, when you deal with an entity that has got a specified business, main business activity that provides finance, their interest income will fall under operating category, okay, and not within the financing category. For without main business main business activity. So it's just that distinction that you need to know for this short type of questions, okay, concerning IFRS 18. Now the main changes from IFRS 18 to IAS 1 was basically these 4 categories that were 5 categories that were introduced and the required subtotals. There were not a lot of changes for your statement of financial position and statement of changes in equity. Your concern is, how do we present the statement of profit or loss according to the function method for FACT 2601, and we will deal with entities without specified main business activity. Can you see we don't indicate this is the operating section, this is the investing section, this is the financing section, this is the tax section, this is the discontinued operation. We will know, okay, colleagues, but this is the operating section, there's the required subtotal, this is the income from investment properties, or the income section for the financing asset. And this is, the investing asset, as you can indicate it here from the investing part, okay? And then the financing section. So if for interest, you have now interest on long-term borrowings or interest on your finance cost, which normally would have been finance cost here, but now we will split them. So your interest expense on borrowings or long-term borrowings or mortgages, it will come in here before your income tax. So you must have that subtotals. Okay, operating profit is the required subtotal, profit before financing and income tax, a required subtotal, profit before income tax, and then the profit for the year, which was introduced. Now, having said that, these are exactly what you need to know for the statement of profit or loss, and there is an example of rainbow example for you concerning the statement of financial statements, and we deal with statement of profit or loss and other comprehensive income statement of financial position. This is now done in accordance with IFRS 18. Okay, rainbow gives you an overview of the new requirements, but colleagues, please, rainbow example is just an example, takes in the totality of the whole module. You cannot understand everything in rainbow example for the moment because you have not yet dealt with the full content of the module. Okay, that is basically there to show you how the financial statements are being presented in lesson tool 3 concerning IFRS 18. Okay, we've had queries concerning, I don't know where that amount goes where, and I don't understand that that amount goes where, or how this, you don't need to understand it. It's just a simple example to show you the full set of financials for FAC 2601 and transactions. Okay, the crux of the module or the example there is not to fully understand it. It's just to work with it and to show you the full set of financial statements. Okay, colleagues. Now, just to go back, please visit the lesson tool 3. There are videos explaining in summary with regards to IFRS 18. There is also a very good videos indicating what has changed specifically with IFRS 18 and what is required. But from our perspective, this is what is required for the presentation of annual financial statements, especially for entities without specified main business activity and presenting your statement of profit or loss. Now I want to show you, okay, a typical example that you can expect in the assessment 1. Okay, this is how technical it can get according to your assessment 1, and how will we draft it or pose it to you for your required. Okay, colleagues, IFRS 18 clearly prescribed the conditions for classifying income and expenses in their operating category of which forms part of the entity's main business activity. So that is the theoretical aspect. What does IFRS 18 prescribes now? It prescribes the way that you will classify income and expenses according to their main business activity. And as we have seen, when you have entities with specified main business activity, for example, here, okay, when entities with specified main business activity like banks, their operating section will differ from what we see without specified main business activity, because this is to do with their operations. This is what their main business drives them. If you're a bank and you give a loan to customers, that interest income is your main business income. That is why it will form part of your operating section here. But if you haven't got a main business entity, specified main business activity, and you obtain a loan from a finance house, okay, then you cannot include it under your operating, but because your main business activity is not to provide loans to people or so forth, it will fall under your other income here, under your finance section here. So your interest expense is different from the finance house. If you can see, this is the finance house. He will provide to you interest. This entity, his main business activity is because he gives out loans. His main revenue is interest income. He will disclose it under his operating section, but you will only disclose it under your finance section. And that is how technical this is in regards to the assessment requirements for you to understand. It is therefore important to identify the entity's main business activity before classifying income and expense items. Can you see that we can require from you the way of the theoretical questions? Now we state, if the entity's main business activity is to provide finance to customers, can you see now, colleagues, where do we fall into? Okay, we are falling into this section. Okay, this is the section with the main business activity. Okay, so we say if the entity's main business activity is to provide finance to customer, into which category will it classify the interest income from loans to customers? Now, colleagues, obviously it has to do with their operating category, because their main business activity is to provide finance. We fall into that section with a main business activity. So what did I explain to you here? We will never ask of you to draft financial statements for entities with main specified business activity. We will always ask, if we were in the exam ask of you, or in your assessment 2, where it's a written type question, we can ask of you, please provide us the statement of profit or loss in terms of IFRS 18 for retail or manufacturing entity. Okay, but we will never ask of you for a bank. But for this type of questions, which are theoretical short type of questions, you need to know the difference between the two. Okay, so from a theoretical perspective, you need to understand that there are two entities. They do have specified main business activities or not, and how will you classify your income and expenses? Okay, and that, colleagues, is basically how we can ask of you for the very first 3 learning units, lesson 2, 1 to 3, in your upcoming assessment for your practical theory type questions. And it's important to understand the theory to be able to apply to your given questions. Now, colleagues, it's important to read the required first. Okay, draft formats of statements. This is basically to do with all examination tips, and which is not really relevant now because your upcoming assessment is for assessment 1, which is an MCQ. Now, colleagues, let's quickly take a 5-minute break, and then I'll be back. I will quickly just take a short loo break, and I will start at 5 to 11 before we will look at inventories. All right, colleagues. If there are any questions currently, I will also look at them when I come back. I just want to get the sip of water as well, and then we can quickly look at your inventory section, which is also important for calculation type of questions. And therefore, colleagues, we will look at IAS 2 at about 5 to 11, just to close off. It will basically take me another 30 minutes to finalize that section. All right, colleagues, thanks a lot. I will be with you shortly. All right, colleagues, I'm back again. Hopefully we can quickly look at IAS 2. And if there are any questions, you can post them on the question and answer section before we start looking at IAS 2. Like I've just said to you, colleagues, we are working towards the assessment 1. Okay, it is, we can't go through everything, but I'm trying to highlight to you what is most important for you to get to the to provide information with regards to the assessment 1 and what you need to know. So colleagues, without further ado, we can start looking at IAS 2. As explained for IFRS 18 and lesson tools 1 to 3, I've indicated to you what is important, how you'll deal with theoretical type of questions, how you do the calculations. I will also upload those PowerPoint presentation slides on the My Module site, and we'll correct those few typing errors, and then you can have them for later viewing. All right, so typically let's concentrate on where is this thing here? Let me just go one step back. And I want to show where is the pointer. Okay, colleagues, inventory. Okay, with regards to learning unit 4 or lesson 2 4 inventory IAS 2, okay, the IFRS deals with the valuation and presentation of inventory. Okay, the purpose is that you need to know your definitions and apply them to different scenarios. You need to calculate the historical cost of inventories, apply the different cost formulas to measure the cost of inventories according to the FIFO, the weighted average or specified identification method, calculate the net present value, the net realizable value, and present and disclose inventories in the annual financial statements. That is basically what IAS 2 consists of. Okay, and we deal with inventory with calculations per se. Yes, there are a few theoretical type of questions that you need to know, but again, you need to understand the theory to be able to apply it to the given questions. So what is the purpose and objective of IAS 2? Is to provide guidelines on how to account for and disclose inventories in the financial statements, because that is what we are working towards to. Okay, so first off, you obtain inventory and you need to cost them. You need to take the purchases, you need to convert them, and you need to include other costs to be able to get the cost of your inventories and then value them according to the FIFO, weighted average or special identification. Then you need to determine whether the net realizable value is above or lower at cost. Okay, and then we need to disclose it. That is what we need to determine. Okay, so inventories consist of, include in the ordinary course of business in the process of production for such sales or consumables to be used in the production of goods and services for sale. We always measure at the lower of cost and net realizable value because we cannot overstate inventories in your books. Okay, how do we cost these items? By using the valuation techniques, either by FIFO, the first in, first out method, the weighted average method, or specific identification, only where goods have been manufactured for specific purposes and are normally not interchangeable. And you need to determine the net realizable value, okay? Or by using standard cost or retail method, all right? Now, colleagues, basically, when you are a manufacturing entity and you manufacture a bicycle, for example, you will determine certain parts, okay? You will get the parts. So this is where we will be working with. So we will deal with the conversion of inventories and we work backwards up. So this is basically where you would start and then you would value them. So first of all, if you are a bicycle manufacturer, okay, you will get all the parts. Say, for instance, what's the cost price on the frame? What's the cost price on the tires or the pedals? If there are import duties, you will work with them. What is the conversion cost? Variable production overheads. We will look at specifically at these type of things a little bit later. Okay, so if you are in a warehouse and you need to put those things together. You need to melt certain things together. That variable production overheads will be determined on a per unit basis. So specific things directly that varies directly with the unit production is indicated on the variable production overheads. Okay, so that normally varies with the units that you produce. Okay, so for instance, all the wages or the special parts that needs to go in there. Fixed production overheads are normally constant, but are specifically allocated to production based on normal capacity. We'll specifically look at something like that, and then other costs to bring those inventories to their present location condition. So this is where you will deal with a bicycle. Okay, you will take the cost, you put them together, you get the conversion cost, you take that together. So now you start building the bicycle. So you get the parts, the labor, you move that to work in progress. What is work in progress? That is where you deal with your conversion costs and then other costs. Then once you've got the bicycle, you can determine or value your inventory according to these valuation methods. Okay, which is up here. You cost the units by FIFO method, the weighted average method, specific identification methods. This is where you would value your inventory. And then, colleagues, this is where you will then determine the net realizable value, and then you measure it at lower of cost and net realizable value. Okay, this is how we will deal specifically with inventory items. It's just to understand the flow process, okay, from where inventories are obtained from, whether you need to manufacture something or whether you buy inventory, which is already a complete unit, and resell them. Okay. Now, colleagues, in your My Module site, there is already a video posted for inventory valuation, explaining these costs, these valuation methods, the FIFO method, the weighted average method according to the periodic inventory system and the perpetual inventory system. I'm not going to go and look at that again. I want to show you what more or less you can expect in your assessment. But to understand the flow process is that when you are a manufacturing entity, what is the cost of inventories? You need to determine the cost. Okay, that cost consists of your raw materials, your labor, your conversion costs, which include your variable production overhead, your other costs. Then you need to value your inventory at year end, and that is determined by the valuation methods here. And then we need to do the presentation and disclosure according to your net realizable value so that you don't overstate your inventories. Okay, so colleagues, the theory again is very important, okay, to be able to apply it to any practical application. This is what we need to disclose. For current assets, you need to bring into consideration your inventory, your finished goods, your raw material, your work in progress, because remember, all of these items will have finished stock, closing balances, okay? 550,000 lower of cost and net realizable value. This is what we need to disclose. The figure here consists of the closing stock. If you were a manufacturing entity, you would have closing stock for finished goods, you would have closing stock for raw material, and you would have closing stock for work in progress. Why do we say that? Because remember, when you purchase raw materials, a lot of frames, you might only issue, say for instance, you've got 100,000 units of frames, but you decide you're only going to issue 50,000 to your conversion method, your work in progress. How many stock will you have left? You will then have, in your closing figure, you will have 50,000 units left. And that is when you determine, okay, well, now we've got 50,000 units in raw material left. How are we, what are we supposed to, how do we need to value them? And that valuation method is your FIFO method, your weighted average. So it's just to give you a picture of how we deal with inventories. Okay, then in the statement of profit and loss, what do we disclose? We disclose the opening stock, which consists of cost of sales, is the opening stock plus your purchases minus closing stock. that is finished goods plus raw material plus work in progress. Those items that was moved to your sale in the course of ordinary course of business when you make a sale. Okay, that is the cost of those items that you sold when you purchased, when you sold your inventories. Okay. So this is just an indication towards where you are working for. Okay, we need to disclose your inventory in your statement of financial position, as well as the cost of the inventories when you sold your items to the public. Okay. Now, Learning Unit 4, Lesson 2.4 consists of your measurement, lower of cost and NRV. What is NRV? Is the selling price less cost of completion and cost necessary to make the sale. Fair value less cost to sell. It is the estimated selling price which could be realized in the normal course of business, less the estimated cost to be incurred in order to complete the product and to make the sale. So that is basically your net realizable value. The value that you can realize from your inventory. Okay, the reason why we need to disclose it at lower of cost than net realizable value is because we cannot overstate your inventory in your financial position. Now, what is the cost involved? Cost involved in bringing the inventory to their present location condition should be included in the cost of inventory. It consists of the direct costs attributable to the production of goods and services. Your work in progress consists of direct labor, direct material, variable production overheads, number of units, fixed production overheads, normal capacity. Okay, how do we measure inventory? We need to measure it according to the determination of the cost. Okay, there's examples 4.2 to 4.2 for page 6 in your lesson tool in the study material. Okay, then you need to apply a cost allocation technique to value them. Like I indicated, colleagues, there is already a good example for the valuation method for inventories on this my module site. We need to determine the NRV and then record inventory at the lower of cost and NRV and normal capacity. Okay. What does the purchase cost include for raw materials? Okay, we can ask you a question, a theoretical type of question of what does it include or not. Okay, so it includes the purchase price, import duties, transport cost. What is the conversion cost, work in progress? It includes your direct labor. What is directly attributable to the work in progress? So you've now moved your frames to the manufacturing department where they will put in the wheels and the pedals. That is your conversion cost, your work in progress. So there, for example, you need to slot in your variable production overhead costs. Okay, what does that consist of? So we move from cost of purchases. So we've purchased now all the frames, we've purchased the tires, maybe we're going to manufacture the pedals or whatever. We bring all those costs together. I've highlighted and summarize the things for you on the cost of purchases. This is now how we deal with inventory when we manufacture things. Okay, so variable production overheads, it consists of product supplies, utilities, wages, shipping costs. This will differ the more units you will produce. So if, for example, you've bought 150,000 units frames, and you will only make 50,000, you will spend less wages, labor wages on the specific production, on the putting together, on the assembly of these items. You will spend less. And we normally use this as per unit. We allocate a figure per unit, and I will show you in an example. Fixed production overheads based on normal capacity. Why do we use normal capacity, colleagues? Because under normal circumstances, we know that our manufacturing warehouse can normally produce 100,000 bicycles per year, for example. Okay, so for instance, we are a bicycle manufacturer. We know that during our full year, normally we can produce 100,000 units, normal capacity. That's when everything goes to standard. Okay, so that is why we will allocate based on a unit, a number according to what we can produce normally. That is why we use a fixed production overhead allocation rate. Variable production overhead is basically that specifically deal with that product. We've got specific staff to fix that pedals. We've got specific staff to fix that or assembly those tires. Okay. That varies with the amount of units that we produce. But fixed production overheads, which include the rent of the warehouse, the salaries for the specific staff dealing with those things, that is specifically included in the manufacturing of your units. And then we exclude abnormal spillage or convert raw materials into finished goods. We won't include that. Then other costs. What are the other costs to bring it into consideration? To bring the inventory to present location condition, design costs normally excluded are selling costs and storing in interest. But this storage costs, colleagues, might differ. For example, if you are a cheese manufacturer, storage cost will be included because that is their maturity rate. Maybe you're a very delicate cheese manufacturer, and those cheese needs to lie there for a couple of months. Those storage costs will need to be included in bringing the inventory to its present location and condition. Then we will use cost formulas to value the finished goods items according to FIFO weighted average specific identification standard cost and retail. Remember, LIFO is never included in inventory valuation. Okay, as indicated, colleagues, we have already got a video on the valuation techniques according to FIFO and weighted average, according to the perpetual and the periodic inventory system, and you can have a go and look at that. Okay. Now, those cost formulas. What are the production overhead costs incurred in the manufacturing process but do not form part of the direct material or direct labor costs? In indirect materials and labor rates and taxes of factory depreciation production included in cost of inventories. Other overhead costs normally incurred in running the operations of an entity that don't relate to the production process. Office rentals, salaries of admin personnel, and salaries. Okay, these items are often referred to as expenses or period costs. Now, colleagues, we've got different valuation methods, but I really want to come to an example, two examples that you can more or less expect in your assessment. Okay. Excuse me. Now, this is a typical example of how we can work out the cost for a manufacturer, a company. Okay, you purchases of motorcycles. Okay, Moto X Limited, a motorcycle retailer which operates in Johannesburg, ordered 40 new top-of-the-range motorcycles from China on 1st of November. It's always important to look at your date and when your year-end date is. Okay, the invoice, the motorcycles were received in Durban on 1st of January 2025, and the invoice price of motorcycles was 50,000 each for 40 units. Okay, before a trade discount of 20% is payable on 28th of February. Now you've got following cash and costs regarding the purchases were 70,000. Now these are costs to include. Okay, the cost comprises freight and insurance, customs duty, cartridges to Johannesburg. Now, colleagues, it's important to note that what is important, how do we determine the cost of these inventory items, cost price, import duty, taxes, and any other costs, rebates, and discounts. Okay, so we can go and use those things to calculate the cost. Okay, during the year ended 28th of February 2025, 50% of the motorcycles were sold on credit by a salesman at 100,000 sales each, and sales commission of 5% was paid to the salesman. Okay, on 1st of January, so this is at year end, we've sold 50% of the motorcycles. Okay, but on 1st of January 2025, 2 months before our year end, motorcycles were withdrawn. 2 motorcycles were withdrawn from inventory and brought into use by Moto X in the ordinary course of business. And the 2 motorcycles are depreciated at 20% per annum on a straight line basis. Now, inventory is valued at the lower of cost and net realizable value on the first in, first out basis. Okay, what is the required? What is the year-end stock value of inventory to be disclosed in the statement of financial position as at your year-end? Okay, so we need to determine what the year-end stock value is. So what we've bought 40 new top of the range motorcycles. So 40 is our stock quantity, and we bought it for 50,000 rand. But we need to include all these costs attributable to the items that we've imported. Okay, and there was a trade discount of 20%. Now let's go and see how we do calculate that. So cost of purchases, colleagues, okay, what is the year-end stock value? What is the purchase price? Is 40 times 50,000 times 80% because of the 20% discount. Okay, that is your cost of purchasing 1.6 million. We know that we need to, according to the theory, we need to bring in the cost associated to bringing the inventory to their present location and condition. That's why we include customs duty cartridge. Okay, and that is 1,940,000 rand. The theory is important to determine the cost of inventories. Okay, that is why we indicated to you out of what does the cost consist of. Well, we know that we bought 40 at 50,000 rand if we go back. Okay, at 50 rand. Okay, but before a trade discount of 20%. Okay, so 50,000 times 80%, okay, will give you your 1.6 million cost. But these costs are inclusive. We need to add it. Now we've got 1,940,000. And how many units did we buy? 40. So the cost per unit is 48,500 per unit. That is the closing stock value. Okay. But colleagues, we need to be able to disclose the stock value in our annual financial statements. Okay, how do we know that our closing stock value consists now of 19? We've just imported 40. Okay, but colleagues, remember that before the year end, okay, 2 months before the year end, we withdrawn 2 for our own purposes to use in the business. That is why 40 minus 2 is 38. Okay, so now we sit with 38 on the 1st of January because we withdrawn 2. Okay, 38. What did we sell? We've sold 50% of the motorcycles on 28th of February for 100,000, and there's a sales commission of 5%. Let's go and see how we deal with that. Okay, colleagues, so that is why there's 19 left in inventory. Okay, at year end, we only sit with 19. Our valuation indicated to us that we have got 48,500 per unit. How did we get 48,500 per unit? We had all the costs, including the discount, plus the freight and insurance, plus the customs duty, plus the cartridge will give you 1940. Divide by 40 gives you 48,500. 48,500 times 19, because we had 40, we withdrawn 2 for our own use. Remember now that motorcycles becomes our property. It becomes our assets for use in the business, where we will write off depreciation. Okay, therefore 38, there's only 38 left, but we sold 50% of it at year end. Therefore we sit with 19 and we multiply it with the cost. So we sit in inventory according to the first in first out method. The NRV according to what is required is 921,500. Okay, that is how we will disclose the figures in the statement. Colleagues, I will again include these questions for you in the my module site. So you don't need to stress about writing down or just taking photos or something. I will include it under PDF. All right. Now, colleagues, this is another example. I'm running out of time. We quickly need to show you a practical type of question where we deal with inventory, the closing stock figure, the variable production overheads, and your fixed production overheads. Okay, what represents the cost of sales figure if the actual production was 150,000 units? Now, the normal capacity of an entity is 200,000 units. Now, you can clearly see that under normal circumstances, we produce 200,000 units per annum. Okay, so we as a company know for a fact that we can produce, say for instance, we deal with bicycles again. we can produce 200,000 units. Okay. The raw material cost is 160 Rand per unit. Direct labor is 100 Rand per unit. Variable production overheads are 40 Rand per unit. And fixed production overheads incurred amount is to 3 million. Okay, so that is what we have incurred for the amount. The closing balance of finished good is 7,500 Rand. Okay, so, sorry, 7,500 units. Assume there is no opening balance. So we need to determine what the closing cost of sales figure is if the actual production of it was 150 units of the year. So colleagues, let's go and put it in. So raw material is 160 Rand. Okay, they've given that us. Raw material cost, which is 160. Okay, we've got direct labor is 100 Rand per unit, 100 Rand per unit. Variable production overheads is 40 Rand per unit. Fixed production overheads, which was incurred, is 3 million, but it's always based on normal capacity. So 3 million divided by your amount of units produced, okay, and that is your 15 Rand per unit. So your total cost per unit is 315 Rand. Okay, cost of inventory sold. So what? How much do we transfer from work in progress? 150,000 units, because we've actually produced during the year 150,000 units. Okay, so that is what our cost of sales figure is if we produced, the actual production was 150,000. So based on our production per unit cost, which is now 315, which include your raw material, your direct labor, your variable production overheads, and your fixed production overheads, is 315. We apply that 150,000 is the actual production cost, okay, times 315 gives you 47,250, and the closing balance is 7,500. There's only 7,500 units. Remember, what does your cost of sales figure consist of? Is your opening stock plus purchases less your closing balance. Okay, that is how you will determine cost of sales. Cost of sales consists of purchases, okay, opening stock plus purchases less closing figure. This example informed us is that you assume there is no opening balance. So we determine 150,000 times the 315. Okay, and we use the closing stock valuation of 315 times 7,500 is 44,887,500 of cost of inventory sold. But hang on, fixed production overheads, we incurred 3 million. Okay, that is the amount of fixed production overheads that was allocated at year end. We know that we have incurred 3 million worth of fixed production overheads, but we've only allocated to production 150,000 based on 150,000 units. Remember, we always allocate fixed production overheads on normal capacity. That's why our fixed production overheads there is 3 million divided by 200,000 is 15 Rand. Okay, now 15 Rand was allocated on 150,000 units. Okay, can you see that we've only allocated during our production process? Okay, we've only allocated 15 Rand, but on 150,000 units. So we've under-allocated fixed production overheads. Under normal circumstances, okay, we know that we can allocate, we make 200,000 units, okay, and your fixed production overheads that were incurred was 3 million. But we've only allocated during the production process 100, based on 150,000 units. Because that is what we produced during this year. Okay, not under normal circumstances. Yes, under normal circumstances, we can produce 200,000, but the actual production unit was 15 Rand. And therefore, there's an under allocation of 750 that we need to add to the cost of sales figure, and the cost of inventories of finished goods sold is 44,887,500, and the fixed production overheads under allocated is 750,000 that you need to add. So our cost of sales figure is 45,637. Colleagues, I explain it again. Fixed production overheads incurred 3 million. That is the fixed production during the year that was allocated to your books was 3 million, but you've only allocated during the year. When you come to the year end, you've realized, oh, we've incurred 3 million worth of fixed production overhead, which consists of the rent, the depreciation on the machinery, the factory salaries, salesman salaries. That was 3 million. But during the year, we've only allocated 15 rand based on normal capacity of 150,000, which was 2250. Okay, so under allocated was 750,000 that we need to add to your cost of sales figure, as there was an under allocation. The total cost per unit consists of 160 rand for raw material, 100 rand for labor, 40 rand variable production overheads, and then 15 rand for fixed production overhead, which was 315. The production of 150,000, what we've actually produced during the year, cost 350 was 47,250, and our less closing stock figure is 75 times 315 and gives you 448,750 plus your additional 750 under allocation. Okay, colleagues, please, there are additional questions on that's embedded on the site. Okay, you can go at stock limited and stock limited solution, which will give you a very good evaluation technique question as well embedded on the site. I went through all the examples that it's quite relevant to your assessment one. Remember that your assessment one is taken place on the 28th of March between 1 and 8. Once you've started, you will only have 2 hours, 2 hours to complete it, and you cannot go in and out. Once you've started, you need to finish it. And if you only start at 18:30, you will only have 1.5 hours. Now, colleagues, this is the second online class dealing with your lesson tools 1 to 4, which is a preparation for your first assessment. And just for closing purposes, remember to send all your technical queries to our dedicated mailbox, where we will address all your questions. I hope this online class was insightful and that you took something from it. It really just displays that you need to know your theory and how to apply the theory on application type of questions. Again, I will add the video and as well as the slides and questions that I've produced. I will also load that on the My Module site. I wish you have got a great week ahead, and we'll quickly start looking at some question and answers. And then, colleagues, hope you've got a great day. Thank you, colleagues, and this is the closure of the online session, and wish you all the best of luck for the upcoming assessment. Thank you, colleagues, and goodbye.